Right, folks, hope you're doing well. Welcome to a new episode of Editor's Desk. Today, we're talking all about the budget. Now, I know that the news headlines have been dominated by news of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry and their explosive interview, but the budget is enough news in and of itself because it was interesting. In many ways, it reaffirmed what we know about the Conservatives and Rishi Sunak, but also there was a bit of a departure from kind of old Conservatives as well. So I want to talk a bit about what happened there. But before we get into all the detail and some of the highlights, if you like, the main thrust of this budget is about the significant extra immediate crisis support. And we're talking here about the furlough scheme and the extension of it, self-employment support, and also this radical super deduction policy that's meant to encourage businesses to invest and foreign investment and things like that. That's the headline. Of course, we had a good performance, I would say, from the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, who immediately after the budget stood up and said, well, this budget was Rishi Sunak attempting to soothe over the cracks rather than fix some of the more chronic issues that actually existed in the UK. His argument was after a decade of chronic underinvestment in infrastructure, in the economy, what we needed to do now was build back better, but from the ground up rather than soothing over the cracks.
I'm sure this budget will look better on Instagram. In fact, this week's PR video cost the taxpayer so much, I was half expecting to see a line in the OBR forecast for it. But even the Chancellor's film crew will struggle to put a positive spin on this. After the decisions of the last year and the decade of neglect, we needed a budget to fix the foundations of our economy, to reward our key workers, to protect the NHS and to build a more secure and prosperous economy for the future.
He in a quite a kind of humorous way said that Rishi Sunak was running a victory lap and he shouldn't be doing that yet at all. Now, let's go through some of the kind of particulars, if you like, and we'll start with the coronavirus support, because one of the main things, as I said, was this idea that furlough would now be extended to the end of September. Now, some people really started thinking, hold on a minute, does this mean lockdown may actually not end on the 21st as forecasted, but actually, it may be extended till September? And the answer is quite simply not necessarily. Since the budget, Rishi Sunak has been doing a press tour and talking about the budget in a bit more detail. And he said one of the major reasons, or the main reasons why furlough has been extended, one is to ensure that we're mapping policy against the most cautious predictions about lockdown. So lockdown could be extended, right? But doesn't mean it will be. However, in the event that the worst case scenario happens and it's extended, we've got furlough extended until September. At the same time, one of the major reasons too is because even though we are all hoping collectively as a country that on the 21st all restrictions are lifted and we're back to normal, businesses will still need a transition period, and I know that jostles some people's hearts. They'll still need the transition period so that they can make necessary adjustments needed to be able to continue kind of business services. So those are some of the reasons why we're seeing the extension too. But for folks you've forgotten, furlough means 80% of employees' wages for hours they cannot work is paid. Now, employers rather, will be asked to contribute 10% in July to this and 20% in August and September. We also saw an increased support for self-employed folks, because they'll be able to claim as well all the way up till September. One of the interesting policies, and it was really interesting to see a BBC report on this, because BBC polled some of the people who would be affected by this, and they said that it wouldn't change their life, but it's something nice, I guess. And this essentially is the £20 weekly uplift rather in universal credits, worth £1,000 a year. That's going to be extended for another 6 months. So we'll see what's happening there. Minimum wage is set to increase to £8.91 an hour from April. In London, that's still shy of the London living wage, but it's some improvement, I guess. Now, I reported in an earlier episode of Editor's Desk that the UK economy last year shrank by 10%. To give you a bit of context, that is the same size as the economy was in 2013. So we regressed almost 7 years in 1 year because of the coronavirus. Now, the economy is forecast to rebound in 2021, and the predicted annual growth by the Office of Budget Responsibility, OBR, is 4%, right? Now, the economy is forecasted to return to pre-COVID levels in the middle of 2022, with growth at around 7.3% next year. So, we are on the up, so to speak. But one thing that was really staggering to kind of understand was, since the pandemic began, over 700,000 people have lost their jobs, which is just a staggering number, right? Unemployment actually is expected to peak at 6.5% next year. And we should put an asterisk on this, because that's lower than the 11.9% that was previously recorded, and that will be because of the furlough scheme. It will be because of what's been, politics aside, an effective vaccine rollout program. It is interesting that the UK is borrowing at a peacetime record of £355 billion this year, which is just. I mean, it's somewhere else essentially, and we'll talk a bit about that later. For taxation, the Conservatives have managed to keep their manifesto pledge of not increasing the income tax, national insurance contributions, or even VAT. That's staying the same, and we're seeing tax freezes on the personal allowance at 12,570. Important to note that when there's a tax freeze, folks go, "Oh, that's great," but sometimes if inflation continues to rise, it can work out as a real terms cut. So we have less money because inflation goes up and our personal allowance stays the same. So that's something to think about as well. And perhaps one of the biggest things folks were discussing on Twitter when it comes to taxation was the policy, or the new initiative, if you like, the corporation tax on company profits above £250,000 will rise from 19% to 25% in April 2023. This is, it's very different to the type of UK that the Conservatives were trying to build, say, 5 years ago. But of course, it's drastic times, and perhaps they call for drastic measures. And to offset some of those freezes and the fact that income tax hasn't being increased, these are some of the changes I think the Conservatives are forced to make. So this is the cost of them keeping that manifesto pledge they had made. Now, there's lots more in the budget, from arts and sports to support for business, digital and science, alcohol, tobacco and fuel. And we'll talk about all of that later on. If you're interested in find out more about some of these policies, then you can go on tcsnetwork.co.uk, because we've got an article by one of our journalists actually covering this and looking at the top 10 different policies that would actually affect you, from this budget. But we're talking here, really, when we think about the increased borrowing and what's happening, we're talking about a £60 billion extra in 1 year that comes from borrowed money, which leaves borrowing for the coming financial year significantly higher than expected. It's a much larger proportion of the exceptional, quite frankly, warlike style borrowing that we saw over the past year. Now, like I said, there has been some net impact of this borrowing, because it's led to that lowering unemployment prediction, right? That rather than the 10%, we're seeing unemployment just over 6%. That's supported in part, like I said, because of the rollout, because of the vaccine rollout too. But what I can't get my head around, and I think what's been really interesting here, is the fact that Rishi Sunak has been forced, albeit by himself and his commitment to other pledges, to raise corporation tax, right, like this, that we haven't seen a raise like this, right, since Dennis Healey in the 1974 budget. I mean, it's crazy, because the idea before was the Conservatives had this this kind of ideology that they would use corporation tax as a lever to bring foreign investment into the country, right? Something similar to the free ports that Rishi Sunak also announced. These are newly developed economic regions in England. They all kind of go across the developed nations, but for the most part, in England right now, where there would be reduced business rates, different incentives put in place to encourage business investment, to encourage private involvement, and essentially to lower unemployment and things like that. That was what we thought would happen. This kind of Singapore style, Singapore and Thames idea, but that's not quite what we've seen. In fact, this raising corporation tax represents what I would say is a radical kind of departure from that policy or that ideology, and now we're altogether somewhere else. Labour's Sir Keir Starmer said that the Chancellor was betting on the recovery fueled by consumer spending, and I think that those are the two different camps, for want of a better term, that we're seeing here. One is that we would have, this was a time to pause and reflect and really fix crumbling infrastructure, really get deep into some of the way the economy, if you like, is stacked against the ordinary person, and to really solve deep, chronic, what Labour may say are systemic issues with the economy, and especially as we come out of lockdown. But instead, they would say what we're seeing here is a chancellor who's just given up and just hoping that people will spend, and that will be the end of it. And I guess Rishi Sunak has a different perspective, at least by this budget, which is let's encourage business, because the way out of this is business, right? We need to encourage and incentivize businesses to hire more staff, to invest, to really go big, and that way things may get better too. And these are two divergent views, but it'll be interesting. We'll keep watching this and following the story. And if you're interested in finding out more about this, you can go to tcsnetwork.co.uk. If you want to join the network, so you're first to find out when we have new stories like this, then the website, and it's free. It's join.tcsnetwork.co.uk. Thank you so much for listening to this, and don't forget to subscribe and turn your notification bells on, and I'll see you in the next one. Please record. Please tell me you recorded that time. Hey, thank you for taking time to watch that video. Here at the Commentators Network, we thrive on exposing you to different ideas. If you're someone who likes ideas, you like learning new things, hit the subscribe button now and turn on notifications so you're first to hear when we have a new video out.